we're going to be looking at today is found in Joshua 3. We're going to start in verse 14. So that's going to be Joshua 3, and we're going to start in verse 13. But first, I want to set the scene a little bit of what's going on in Joshua before what's taking place in this passage. The Israelites have been wandering the desert for 40 years, and they find themselves camped just over the Jordan River from the Promised Land. They've been taking 40 years to finally get here, and they're here, and they're camped, and they're waiting to cross the Jordan River. Their leader that they had had through this whole period of time coming out of Egypt and going through the desert for 40 years has just died, and they find themselves in the capable hands of a new leader named Joshua. Now God's instructed Joshua that it's time for the people to cross over into the land that they've been waiting so long to see. When that day arrives, Joshua instructs the people that they have 3 days to pack everything up and get ready to cross the river. So the day comes when it's time for them to cross the river, and God says to Joshua, "Today's the day I'm going to make you better in the eyes of the people. I'm going to show them that I will be with you just as I was with Moses as you lead this people." So we're going to pick up in verse 14 of chapter 3. It says, "When the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. So when those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests were bearing the ark were dipped in the edge of the waters flowing from above stood still, rising up in a single heap far off at Adam. This city is beside Zarethan. While those following toward the sea of Arabah, the Dead Sea, were wholly cut off. Then the people crossed over opposite Jericho. While all Israel was crossing over on dry ground, the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood on the dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan. When the entire nation had finished crossing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, 'Select 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, and command them, take 12 stones from here, out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood. Carry them over with you, and lay them down in the place where they camped tonight.' Then Joshua summoned the 12 men from Israel, whom he had appointed, one from each tribe. Joshua said to them, 'Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, one from each of the tribes of Israel, so that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, what do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off in front of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, when it crossed the Jordan over the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, so those stones shall be to the Israelites a memorial forever." And I'm going to skip to verse 19. It says, "The people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the 5th month, and they camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. Those 12 stones which they had taken out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal, saying to the Israelites, 'When your children ask their parents in time to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know. Israel crossed over the Jordan here on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we crossed over, so that all the people of the earth may know that the hand of God is mighty, and so that you may fear the Lord your God forever.'" This passage talks about the mighty hand of God, but I thought it would be helpful if we took just a couple minutes to think about what makes this happening so amazing. The Jordan River is much like the rivers and streams that we have around here. There are times of year where it would not be a big deal for us to just walk across or, kind of wade across because there's not much water in it. But the day that God chose for the people to cross over, we see in verse 15 of chapter 3, was the day of harvest. It was the day when the river was overflowing. It was going over the banks. Stop to think about what you would think if you walked up to a river that you knew you had to cross that was full of water and overflowing, and I would imagine a little bit, fast and not something that you would just step across. As I was reading this week, I was trying to pin down exactly how many people were going to cross into the Promised Land. And no one really has a good answer as far as I could find. I had a wide range, anywhere from 20,000 people to 2 million people. So, that's a pretty big span, but even if we went with the smallest group, if we went with 20,000 people, think about how much time that it would take 20,000 people to cross a river in Bend. And that whole time, the water was held back. And also, there were small children, so obviously it wasn't the fastest process. All that took place for the water to stop and be held upstream were that the feet of those carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the priests, touched the very edge of the water. They weren't in the river, they just touched the edge of the water, and all the power and volume of that river stopped and was held up upstream so that all the people of God could cross into the land that he had promised them. It's truly amazing. So God instructed Joshua to have one person from each tribe go and take up a stone and carry it on their shoulders. Now I'm thinking that these weren't, just little rocks or little stones, but they weren't so big that a man couldn't carry them out. So I'm thinking they're probably the size of, a medium garden stone or a basketball or maybe a bowling ball, something that you could easily carry. And they took them with them. And they piled them up at the place that they camped for the night. Now, when I first read this story, I was like, oh great, a pile of rocks, no big deal. But then I wanted to know a little bit more. If I saw a pile of rocks that were that big sitting in someone's yard, I'd probably wonder why they put it there, and I might even ask, what are you planning on doing with the stones? So I think it's good to ask, what was God's purpose? What was the reason God wanted this pile of stones? Memorial stones. The stones were considered memorial stones, and they were set up for a reason. The first reason was to remind the people, to teach future generations what God had done for his people on this day. Just like me, kids ask great questions, and sometimes not so great questions that we don't want to answer, but this gave the people an opportunity to say, those are the stones that we put there to remember, and tell the story all over again to those people, to the next generation. They were passing it on. And in a way, I kind of see it like a carrot that you dangle in front of a horse, only God, maybe for kids it's a piece of candy or something that God's dangling in front of them to ask the question, so that parents have the opportunity to pass on the wisdom and the stories of what God has done for the people. The stones were also erected to show that God wanted the whole world to know what he had done. He wanted the whole world to know that his hand was mighty. He didn't want just his people to know that he was capable of great things. It's kind of like a way for him to be known by everyone and not be kept a secret. The might of the Lord and his ability to do great things is not kept a secret because the stones are out in the open where everyone can see them. The last reason we're given that this pile of stones is erected, or the pile of memorial stones is erected, comes in verse 24 of chapter 4. And it talks about how God wanted his people to fear him. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear the word fear, I really struggled with, does God really want his people to be afraid of him? You have fear of God because you know he can do great things, but I always have this picture of God in my mind that he loves us and cares for us, and so it's hard for me to believe that he wants us to fear him. So I whipped out my language software and decided to look at the Hebrew word that they use for that, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce because it's not my thing. But I figured out that it can actually mean to be reverent. So God wanted his people to be reverent to him. In a way, he wanted his people to remember what he had done for them. He wanted them to look at the stones and remember the respect that they had for God, and remember that in this time when they needed him to care for them and provide for them a way to get to the land that he had given them, he was there, and he was there with Joshua. So, what does this story mean to us today? How can we take it and apply it? First, we need to remember to teach younger generations. I know this is a big concern for Jeremy and I. We want to make sure that we teach Sydney the stories of the Bible, and not just, here's a great story, let's tell you the story, but how to apply the stories so that she knows that they influence how she does her life, and so that she learns that this book is more than a book of stories, that it's a way for her to see a testimony of God and his hand of provision. The church has been through many ups and downs throughout the span of time, from the Israelites to now. And the one consistent thing that we can tell our kids is that God has been with us through the good, through the bad, when we screw up and when we do things right. That he's constantly there and faithful to walk with us, and that he is able to do mighty things. We often take communion together, and in my mind, this is a great way to remember the forgiveness that God offers us and the grace that he offers us. The next time we celebrate communion, let's keep in mind that the sacrifice of Jesus is important, but it was through the hand of the Father, the mighty hand of the Father, that provided his Son so that we could be reconciled to him. Eating the bread and the juice is a way not only that we show our thanksgiving for what God has done within each of us, but it's also a way of us to have reverence for God, to remember the respect and the love that we have for him.